So let's start with who you are, who's joining us today. How many of you are founders or entrepreneurs? Okay, wow, a lot. It's Haas after all, right? How many of you are corporate execs? Okay, you can be more than one thing. How many of you work in government, in public service? Oh, we got people to recruit here. Okay. How many are volunteers? Okay. How many are nonprofit execs? Okay. All right. And how many serve on boards, either nonprofits or publics? A lot. Okay. So we've got a lot of experience here. I'm going to start us off. I'm going to tell you just a little bit about me because it's very interesting that I was asked to do this panel. I never thought about it as an encore career coming to Haas, but that's exactly what it was for me. So I'll tell you briefly about myself. I'll tell you about the center that I founded, Center for Social Sector Leadership. Not to kind of toot our horn because you have to know about this, but a lot of it opens doors for you and has offerings that you can take advantage of. And then I'll introduce the panel, which is where the real wisdom up here lies. And they'll tell you a little bit about themselves, and we have some questions, and hopefully we'll have some time for your questions as well. Okay? All right, so with that, I'm Nora Silva. I'm a serial founder, a nonprofit exec, and I came here 20 years ago. And I came here after running these different organizations. I tend to be a founder. You put me someplace, I grow. This is what I do. And my former nonprofits were on domestic violence, volunteerism, and community service. And during the time of the community service work, I was working with AmeriCorps. Anybody know about AmeriCorps? I was in charge of training and technical assistance for AmeriCorps programs across the country in organizational development. Personnel, finance, team building, all of that. And I could see with just a little bit of training and opportunity, the incredible transformation these mostly young people went through. And so for me, it was like, oh, I could do that actually in a school. And the honest truth is, I didn't see the job opening here. 5 of my friends from across the country did and sent it to me and said, this has your name written all over it. Okay, and they were right. Because for me, it's always been about students and alumni. That's why I came, that's why I come to work every day. My research, by the way, is on multi-sector leadership, which will come up, I think, here. And in that, I learned what an incredible role serendipity plays in the careers of the top 2,000 execs in the US, and you'll hear it today from our panelists. So I'm here as your moderator. I just want to tell you about the resources available to you from Center for Social Sector Leadership, and then we'll hear from our panelists, okay? So we offer 20 courses at Haas in some version of social impact. Things like nonprofit boards, strategic financial management, and ones you wouldn't expect, like reinventing capitalism. Anyone who was in Conflict Lab this morning? Okay, that's one of our courses. And you can audit our courses as alumni. Okay, most of them are in person, but we will have some online that we're planning on now. But keep that in mind. We have 4 signature programs. One is Impact CFO. We are trying to train the next generation of social impact finance people, because in any one week there are 7,000 open positions in this country going unfilled. Philanthropy Fellows, if we have any recent alumni here, we do place fellows at a foundation to learn about philanthropy and being a grant maker. And Social Sector Solutions, for those of you on boards, this is our partnership with McKinsey, where we provide students coached by a McKinsey coach to help with really gnarly, important problems in all kinds of social enterprises. And finally, Berkeley Board Fellows. Do we have anyone in here who took Berkeley Board Fellows when you were a student? 1, 2, a couple, yeah. Okay, 3, great. We place students in pairs on local nonprofit boards. And I'm thrilled to announce that we just are concluding a pilot for offering an alumni board community to alumni to prepare you, if you're interested in serving on a board, to prepare you how to do that, what you need to know, and to help launch you. Okay? At the end, I'll put up a QR code so you can dial into us and find out what else we're doing. I also would be remiss if I didn't introduce Linda. I'm going to do it to you. Linda Fry, please stand up. Linda is our brand new executive director. Just starting month 4. Okay. All right. So let me introduce our panelists. And I'm going to start with Chappie Jones in the middle, full-time MBA 1990. Chappie's background is as a marketing exec, and then he went to become a vice mayor and on city council of San Jose. Beth Scanlan on the end is an MBA 2000. She's a founder of Scanlan Wealth Management Group at Morgan Stanley, and she has been volunteering and serving on boards and a philanthropist during her career as well. John Dwyer, BS 1984, worked for the government, Department of Justice, just retired as a partner at Cooley law firm. He's the incoming chair of the California Academy of Sciences, and I'll let him tell you what he's doing now without spoiling that for you. So, Chappie, could I ask you to start us off with some introduction?
Great. Thank you, Nora. Actually, I'm really excited to be here. Let me tell you a little bit about my journey. I got my undergraduate degree from UC Davis. Go Aggies, if there's any UC Davis folks here.
Yeah.
In economics. And then I moved down to the Bay Area to try to find my fame and fortune. I got a job at General Electric where I worked in finance. Wanted to go back to school, and so I went back and to here at the Haas program. I graduated again in the class of 1990, so go class of 1990.
All right.
That's right. And post business school, I had jobs in finance, marketing, and sales for companies like AT&T and Apple, as well as managing a IT consulting company or business with 60 employees. So I had a very, successful corporate career, small business career, but it really didn't, satisfy my passion. And so I made a major pivot and went into public service, running for city council. I was elected, and I served on San Jose City Council for 8 years. I currently work for a private consulting firm doing public affairs. And we'll go into a lot more detail, but that's kind of a high-level view of my journey.
Wow. Thanks, Chappie. Beth, go ahead.
Thanks, Nora. Let's see. This is a bit intimidating, speaking to many other Haas alum, but I'm going to do my best. And I always find it helpful to understand someone's roots. So here's mine, especially because this is a conversation about a pivot. And Nora has just mentioned my latest iteration, but there was a lot before that. So I was born with the math gene as a daughter of a PhD in applied mathematics. And this will be relevant as I explain a little later. I am a double bear, so I earned my BA degree from Cal now many years ago and intended to go to law school and spent a few years getting work experience ahead of this as a stockbroker. And during this time, I tinkered with learning finance because I hadn't taken a single finance class as an undergrad. It was all law. And I became a certified financial planner, which at the time was a 5-year program. So I was very proud of earning that. But I was still very curious. I was also in my 20s and very curious to learn more about the financial world in a far deeper way. And I returned to Cal here at Haas, that other school across the way from the law school, to earn my MBA in the late 1990s. I was bit by the startup bug, like many of us were in the late 1990s. Within these walls were actually the walls over there. And I was inspired by now interim dean, but then Professor Jenny Chapman in her leadership class when she hosted, this is going to be hopefully pretty interesting to you, the late Patty Dunn, the former chairman of Barclays Global Investors, which was later acquired by BlackRock. At the time, they were testing this new product called the ETF, which is now ubiquitous with $4 trillion, but back then it was zero and it was just an idea. So here's the sidebar, which is where my math gene pops out. Yes, I learned a little bit about my dad before we spoke today. I'm like, oh, of course he did that for the Rand Corporation, Monte Carlo testing. I didn't know that. That's where it comes from. So at the time, I was developing quantitative models that harness modern portfolio theory, pioneered by the economist Harry Markowitz, who was and I was in search of a vehicle on which my models could run. It was all hypothetical at the time. And here comes Patty Dunn into this class, and I thought, oh my God. So I volunteered after class to be a beta tester, and she said, you're on. and that was it. It was a great match, and it was a spark for our startup. We raised a little over $10 million in venture funding. I was the CEO, founder, and I ran this until 2002, at which time we sold, and I returned to Wall Street, but this time to run the very models that I had created for others. So to this day, this is my world. I'm a portfolio manager as well as a financial advisor to entrepreneurs and early employees of many tech companies. I work closely with our E-Trade division, for example, and that's my professional world. But my other passion is to serve art communities, which is where Nora and I connect very deeply. I serve on not-for-profit boards. I usually end up being the treasurer, not at first, but that's kind of where it winds to. And I volunteer in a wide range of capacities. On a personal note, I'm married, I have 4 kids, and the youngest of which has just turned 13 today. It's her birthday.
Wow, happy birthday.
Teenager.
Ooh. Good luck. John.
Hi, everybody. Is this on?
I believe so.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm John Dwyer. Really nice to see all of you. A class of '84. When I graduated from Cal, my first year, I worked at Arthur Anderson, and I swear to God this happened this morning. I wanted to see the Arthur Anderson Stadium in the main building, so I went over there to look at it, and there were 2 younger people. I don't know how old they were, but they were younger. And they literally, if you ever want to feel old, they literally, one said to the other, "Who was Arthur Anderson?" And the other one said, "I think he was an alum from the 70s. So this has been a very hard day for me so far. After working at Arthur Anderson for 10 months, I went back to law. I went to law school.
Okay.
I graduated from law school. I practiced for a couple of years, and then I had the great good fortune of going back to Washington, D.C. To work in the Clinton administration. I had a great run. I really had a wonderful time there. My last year, I was the number 3 official in the Justice Department. So it was Jan Areno was the Attorney General, Eric Holder was the deputy, and me. So you know those 2 for sure. They did better than I did after that. And then I came back to private practice here in Silicon Valley. Had a wonderful run here. Kind of had a chance to almost represent everybody who were real movers and shakers in Silicon Valley, from Jerry Yang, who founded Yahoo, to my very first big project was for Jensen Huang and NVIDIA in 2000. And my last big project was for Jensen Huang and NVIDIA in 2024. And in between, things for Uber and Sheryl Sandberg. I mean, I just got really lucky. I was at a firm that was really, really well connected, and I took advantage of those connections. And then several years ago, I decided it was sort of time for a change, and we'll talk about sort of what that process was. But I ultimately decided I was going to go be a high school teacher. For me, I loved my career, and this transition was not prompted by a lack of any issue with what I was doing. It was a sense that I fortunately have been in a position that I have more flexibility financially than I did before. And I really wanted to do something that to me felt more service oriented. And so I went through quite a process of trying to figure out what that is. And somehow I decided to become a high school teacher. And it's a pretty cumbersome Are there any high school teachers here? I'm just curious. It is such a pain to get certified in the state. And so you got to do 2 semesters of student teaching, amongst other things. So I'm in my first semester of student teaching. I randomly was assigned to Burlingame High School, which I graduated from in 1980. So I hadn't been back in that building in 44 years when I went back. It's been an absolute blast, and we'll talk about that and the experiences. One of the questions Nora's going to ask us is sort of some of the fears that we had. I will tell you, my fear was all ego-driven, and my fears have borne out completely. My ego has been destroyed in the last 3 months, but really happy to be here.
Great, thank you. Okay, so as we talked about, what questions do we want to ask? I had some real softballs, and the panel said, let's just dive right in. So the first question is, how did you know when it was time to leave something or pivot? Who would like to start?
I'll start. For me, like I said, it really wasn't I wasn't unhappy, but I got to a point that I wasn't loving it. I was loving like chasing the next client, getting that, closing that deal. But then, like, I'm a litigator. The legal work that followed was like, man, I don't want to do this anymore. I've been doing it a long time. So I just had enough. And I actually got there. I was just about there in February of 2020, and then COVID hit. and COVID actually gave me a renewal in some ways. I held management positions in my firm. Cooley's a big firm. We got 1,500 lawyers. We have 300 in Palo Alto alone, and a lot of staff. And for me, COVID weirdly was really rejuvenative to me because a lot of people were scared, and we sent everybody home. Like everybody in business went through this process, but I was head of the office, and so it was a chance for me to look at other skills that I hoped I had to make people calm and let them know we'd get through it. And so it actually was quite invigorating for me in a bizarre way. But once that emergency was over in 2023, I started revisiting the question. And to me, it was really just that I wasn't loving what I was doing anymore. I didn't dislike it, but I just wasn't fired up to do it. And I'd always been fired up to do what I was doing, and it just wasn't there.
Right. I wonder how many people is that resonating at the moment? You know, it's okay, you like it, but you don't love it anymore. So thank you. Anybody else? Beth,
I'll jump in because it's happened to me a few times.
Okay.
And I wonder if folks can resonate with this. For me, when do I know when it's time to leave or to pivot? It begins with an inkling, which then sort of moves to a curiosity, and I want to go deeper. And my level of involvement changes from bystander to engaged to wanting to lead. And it's almost always like that for me. Or in some cases, it starts with an aha moment, an opportunity that feels right, very deeply right, or a sudden change or a sudden new reality that demands the pivot. And sometimes that change is not a pleasant one. It's your new reality, and you need to you need to embrace it. Because running away is not going to be effective. But in all cases, something has transformed my world, Nora, my paradigm, where I've felt the imperative or I've been forced to navigate the redirect. Emphasis on the word navigate.
Okay.
And yes, Ernest Shackleton is my hero, and I've recently been rereading his journeys.
Wow.
Very interesting.
For me, it actually wasn't a moment. I remember from a young age having this desire to go into public service, but I kind of went the more traditional track of, majoring in economics, working for corporations, going to business school, working for more corporations. But the whole time, I just still had this longing for public service and going in a different direction. But I was motivated by fear of getting out of my comfort zone, fear of failure. Running for public office is the ultimate job interview, right? And you're really putting yourself out there. You're being judged. People are deciding if you have what it takes, and they ultimately decide yes or no. So I had been talking about running for office for like 19 years into my marriage, to the point where literally, I guess this was a defining moment where my wife said, either do it or shut the hell up, and I never want to hear it again. Literally, that was the conversation. And so I was working at Apple at the time. I loved my job. I loved Apple. I loved what I was doing. I was making a difference. But I just said, this is a defining moment. So I called my boss up, and I gave him 4 months' notice. I said, I'm going to quit my job, going to run for office full time, and we did, and we won, and that's where I ended up.
Okay, I want you to keep that mic for a minute because I want to dig deeper on risk and fear when it's present. And yours was really pretty public. You really went out there. So what were your fears, and how did you handle them in terms of running for public office at that transition? How much
time do you have? Obviously, there's the obvious fear of rejection. There's fear of, just putting yourself out there. Speaking, in front of, I don't know how many people are here, 100 people. I've had to speak in, crowds of 1,000, 2,000 people. Just putting yourself out there. Doubting yourself. There's the whole imposter syndrome, particularly after I won. You know, it's kind of like, wow, I fooled everybody. I actually won. Now, people think I know what I'm doing. I have no idea what I'm doing. So you have all those fears. But it's just, if you pursue your passion, if it's something that's going to fill your cup up in terms of, what brings you joy and satisfaction, then you can deal with all the other, fears and, anxiety. But it has to be something that you're passionate about. Otherwise, don't do it.
Okay, clear. John?
Yeah, so I had all those same fears. In fact, on my short list a long time ago was to run for office, and I was too scared to ever do that, actually. So it was fear of loss of ego. You do something for a long time, and if you're fortunate enough to be decent at it, you have a reputation. You come into a room, people show you a certain amount of respect. You have a place, you fit in the universe, especially living on the peninsula, so dominated by Silicon Valley. I sort of had a place in that. A little fear on financial stuff, and my own one piece of advice I would have, everybody I know that's done this, the number that they want to reach before they feel secure always moves. And if you get on that track, you will never be satisfied. And so that was a big thing for me, finally saying, the number I was at was like twice what it was, 5 years ago, and it was finally saying, I'm okay. And fear that I wouldn't be good at it. And to let you know how far I've fallen. I was teaching, so I'm teaching a freshman class, so all the kids are 14 and 15 years old. And like 2.5 weeks in, and it's hard to the teachers. I mean, this is hard. I'm used to public speaking, but I realized every time I speak, like in a courtroom, people are paid to listen to me, which the students aren't. And about 3 weeks in, this one girl, she's 14 or 15 years old, clearly the most popular girl in the classroom. As she was walking out, said loud enough for everybody to hear, "Mr. Dwyer, that was a really good class." And I'm like, yes! I honestly, I went home and I called my sister. So anyway, so it was fear of finding a new place in the world, basically. It was the main thing.
Okay, that's hard to follow. That's a great story. So I tend to be anti-phobic. So I'm drawn to situations that can be uncertain, yet are exciting, whether on a ski hill or professionally or in a volunteer situation. If it's a difficult situation, I'm drawn to it. I'm just a natural problem solver and I love puzzles. I'm drawn to the challenge. And what do I do? So this is why this conflict session was so interesting to me. I will deeply try to understand the stakeholders. And that is something we learned extensively here at Haas. Not just you and me, but who are all the other people, especially when you're running a startup and you have a board of directors and you have customers and you have your whole greater society and the financial world is changing. This is 2000, so just think about that, right? And then you ultimately want to navigate a solution that's win-win. And I know that sounds, very, simple, but it's very complex because there's so many moving parts to that. And I have found that you might be challenging the status quo, and the more you're challenging the status quo, which I tend to do somewhat often, the more delicate the process becomes. It's really complicated, but I love it. I'm drawn to the challenge.
Thank you. I'm chuckling here because you said challenge the status quo. I am surrounded by people who say challenge the status quo. The Haas defining leadership principle is question the status quo. Right? Now, I'm not correcting you. I'm saying some of us kind of lean toward the challenge end, right? Right? And especially if you're talking about social impact, right? You're going to challenge things. Okay. So, John, forgive a reference to business school, but we're taught in business school to focus, to be strategic, to differentiate, right? To get really targeted and really clear. And yet, if you read a lot of the literature, if you listen to people, second half of life, new careers, what often is required is imagination and creativity and jumping into things that you don't know you'll be good at, in fact, maybe fear that you can't even do. In what ways has your MBA training or your legal training, John, helped you in your second or next act? And in what ways have you had to overcome what you were taught in your primary career?
Want me to jump in? Well, business school, as we all know, has taught us to be strategic and to frame problems with spreadsheets and lots of data and to become experts with Excel, which I'm far better at than any other tool, and to flesh out an idea and to build a process, and even in not-for-profit work. I do the same thing. I learned how to design the chart of accounts and to create budgets and to work with the various stakeholders, et cetera. Very left-brained work. But in my second half, I've learned to lean into that right brain and to reawaken the creative side and to think and feel in color and not just black and white. So examples would be jumping into situations where I have no experience, yet I'm wanting to roll up my sleeves and learn. I don't know how many of you have read Carol Dweck's Growth Mindset, but it's a fantastic book which focuses exactly on this endeavor. So I use my growth mindset with boards and teaching and volunteering.
Great. Great.
I can think of a very specific scenario that really goes to the heart of your question. San Jose addressed the issue around minimum wage. And I was on council when we were having a very robust discussion. And my MBA training, my business training, told me to just focus on the facts, focus on the data. And so that's how I approached it. If we raise minimum wage to like $15 an hour, what's the impact on small business, on business in general, on employment, all the metrics that we would analyze and discuss on council, or we should have been analyzing and discussing on council. Those are the things that I was focusing on. Also, I realized that Silicon Valley is just like the rest of the Bay Area, where it's just like Dickens, it's the best of times and the worst of times. So we have all these, workers working full time who aren't making enough money to even feed their family, pay their rent. So how do you balance the emotional perspective with the analytical perspective? So I really, struggled with that. But at the end of the day, I supported an increase in the minimum wage with the understanding that it has an impact on business and employment. But I made the decision, and not only did I make the decision to increase minimum wage in San Jose, but I led the effort to increase minimum wage throughout Silicon Valley. So it was tough.
I bet there's some stories there.
I guess just real briefly, I would say both law school and business school, I think, teach you to think in a certain analytical way.
Right.
I actually think the three most significant career decisions I've made, at the end of the day, they were all gut level, instinctual decisions. And I think the reality is, with respect, people can overanalyze stuff, and I've been guilty of that before. But when I look at those three decisions, I just say I kind of knew what the right thing was, even though there were risk in every one of them. Mm-hmm. If anything, maybe the analytical thinking was a little bit of a hindrance in a way. But it wasn't. It was at the end of the day, some decisions you just have to trust your gut, I think.
Right. It's interesting. We have three highly trained people here in business and law, and at the end of the day, it's like you jump into it somehow. Yeah. One thing that hasn't been mentioned that I'll share is when you decide to leave a job, for me was very different. So I'll just, I was a nonprofit executive director, Tri-Valley Haven for Women Domestic Violence Program in Alameda County, and it was 1 a.m, and we were at a county hearing for funding again. It started at something like 7 p.m., and it dragged on every year. And I was sitting there with my full board, to their immense credit, lobbying for funding against handicapped kids and elders who were hungry, and we're all there jockeying for money. And I looked at myself and I said, I can't do this anymore. This is the last time. So I just want to raise that, because for some people, that's what happens. You may not know what's next, but you know what you can't do right now anymore. So it's just another way of looking at it. Yeah, okay. I mentioned earlier that my colleague Paul Jansen and I did a study on serendipity. And we didn't start out with serendipity. We started out interviewing 1,500 corporate CEOs and their management team, 300, I think it was, elected and appointed officials, federal and state, top foundation, 100 foundation presidents, top 100 nonprofit executive directors. And we wanted to know the degree to which they had hopped across sectors. You know, if you're a corporate CEO, did you come from a nonprofit or a government role or vice versa? What we actually found was that 50% of people are simultaneously doing these things. So if you think you're odd, if you're working in corporate and volunteering and doing this and serving on school board, fully 50% of the leaders in this country do this. They don't talk about it much. But when we interviewed 30 of them, the most common word we heard was, yes, it helped their careers, it helped their organization, it helped them personally. And how did they find this next thing that they did? Serendipity. That was the word that was most commonly used. So when I asked people on the panel, what role did serendipity play in your choice of engagement?
Yeah, so I'll give
Go ahead.
Just three quick things. So the nonprofit boards that I'm on currently, I've been on others, but the ones that I spent the most time on are Bay Area Legal Aid, which is the largest provider of legal aid services in Northern California, and the California Academy of Sciences, which is in Golden Gate Park and does a whole bunch of research. The reason I'm on those is I think the big issues facing America, among many, are income inequality, climate change, and both of those kind of fulfill that sense for me. I got on both of those boards totally randomly because somebody I knew from years ago. The Cal Academy board was somebody who had worked at the Department of Interior during the Clinton administration, who I hadn't seen in years, who called me up and said, would you be interested? In sort of similar situation with the other one. When I went to D.C., which was the best decision I've ever made, it was just, for me, it was just the greatest job of all time. I had worked on the Clinton campaign in 1992 in Northern California, so it wasn't exactly hotly fought here, right? It wasn't like I was in Little Rock. But Clinton obviously won. The people are going back. I told one of the people who was a senior member of the campaign that I had a job I was just offered a job as a federal prosecutor in San Francisco, but I would love to go back to work in D.C. if something happened. And about a week and a half after the inauguration, so this is like February 2nd or 3rd, I got a call from this person who said, I've got a job for you, you got to come back. And I'm like, oh yes, this is great. And I said, what is it? And she said, I want you to run the mailroom in the White House. You can imagine, I was fortunate enough, my parents were able to help me to go to law school financially. You can imagine that conversation, hey, Mom and Dad, I want to go to D.C. to run the mailroom. So in addition to serendipity, I just want to say trust every once in a while. This woman promised me, she said, I promise you, if you come back and you help me with this, I will get you over to justice in 6 months. I promise you, but I need you. It was like, I really, really need you. And so I did it. And that's the biggest risk I've ever taken. And it could have totally backfired. If I left Washington, D.C. as the senior male guy, I mean, it would have been bad. But she came through, and I ended up very lucky. So sometimes you have to trust people along the way as well.
Yeah, yeah.
So I sit on 4 nonprofit boards. So one of the lessons I want to impart to you is learn to say no. I'm sorry,
it's so funny because when we get to another question, I was going to say, learn to say yes at any opportunity. So we'll have a little wrestle there in a little bit.
No, but actually all 4 boards are related to issues that I worked with and dealt with when I was on city council. So it was just a natural transition once I was termed out of office for them to approach me and say, Chappie, you've been a big supporter of ours, our mission. One is, social services, public safety, education, these different areas that I had a passion and I supported those organizations. So it was just natural for them to extend an invitation to join their board.
I love this question, Nora, because I believe very strongly in serendipity. And I feel it's quite real. Or would you call it luck? Or would you call it circumstance? You've heard the expression opportunity meeting preparedness and openness. You're ready, and the opportunity presents itself, and you seize it. This has happened to me so many times. It happens to me, I wouldn't say daily, but I would say weekly.
Yeah.
You're interested in a particular opportunity. You're interested in meeting a certain person. You're interested in a certain idea, and things come together. I don't want to get too woo-woo about this, but I actually believe pretty strongly in it.
Great. That was the other thing we heard, the yes, no, and listen to that woo-woo, whatever it is. From the people that we interviewed, I'll give you one example. Steve McCormick? Yes, I think it was Steve McCormick was working at Goldman Sachs. And he had two young teen sons who were very, very concerned about the environment. Now, this is a couple decades ago. And so he started looking at investing, green bonds, these kinds of things very early on. And he loved his job at Goldman Sachs, but he was going home and his kids were asking him, so what did you do about the environment? And finally, he out of nowhere got a call asking him to be the president of the Nature Conservancy. Now think about that jump, right? It's not the mailroom, but it's not up from Goldman Sachs. And he said yes, not knowing why. Not knowing, it was only in retrospect that he realized the influence that his young sons had had on him, so that when an opportunity came that seemed to him completely out of the blue, he said yes. So there is something about saying yes, not just hearing the serendipity, but jumping to it. So
she agrees with me, basically.
So
I mean, that's clear, right? I mean,
it's once you get the job.
Just one clarification. Say yes, 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 and then no.
Let's go to that. I'm going to skip over. Let's go to that. How many of you, again, have served on a nonprofit board or want to? Okay, so we're preaching to the choir here. So when is it important? You've all served on boards. When is it important to say yes? When is it important to say no? I'm throwing you a curveball here, I know. Good.
Well, this is interesting because I am drawn to smaller not-for-profits.
Okay.
So my specialty is working with not-for-profits that are 500,000 to 2 million, and being the one who signs the Form 990 and the person who helps with the strategic plan and the modeling. I've also helped with many other things. Currently, I'm helping to plan a gala. I'm not good at that. I offered to price out the entire event, but suddenly I'm doing a lot of other things, which is great. No, I love it. Great crew. But for me, it's easy to say yes when I feel like I can make a difference. And whether it's strategy or finance, or it's an area that I'm very passionate in. I'm now serving on the board of the Peninsula's Girls Chorus. My daughter is a singer. And when they were asking for volunteers to join the board, my husband looked at me because they asked. It was the middle of a concert. And he said, I know what you're thinking. No, you don't have time. And I thought, I have to do it. So when the call came out 6 months later at the next concert, I said, no, I'm going. They're still looking for somebody. So that, to me, that was a clear yes. As I said, 500,000 to 2 million, that's where they really need help. Where I say no is some of the larger organizations, as much as, because, you only have so many hours in the day, and they have a bunch of Beths, they have a bunch of us. And I very much want to do that, but I also have a career and a full-time job and a 13-year-old today at home. Maybe ask me in 5 years or 10 years when things are not quite so crazy. But right now, that's where my energy is.
Okay.
Yeah, I think my response is the same. I think I'd say it slightly differently, which is, to the extent you have a mental Venn diagram in your head, I think we all need to work. Work is hard, and we all need to work to find joy and passion in what we do in our extracurricular activities. I think we need to do that consciously and intentionally. So to me, and with those two, Cal Academy of Sciences and Bay Area Legal Aid, to me, when you look at sort of what I care about, those two organizations are perfect overlap for me. So to me, it was a no-brainer on both of those. And we were sort of joking. I would say no to some. There's so many great organizations, but I mean, the Peninsula Girls Choir. I'd say no to that. I don't have a girl in the Peninsula Girls Choir, right? It's not my passion.
We could use a lawyer, though.
But I think when you find something, the people that I find that are unhappy on nonprofit boards are the people that you have a sense were collecting pelts, kind of. They wanted it on the resume. They had 4 or 5, and they didn't really care about any of them, or they were spread so thin that they couldn't contribute to any of them. And both of those undercut the experience. So to me, if you can find the passion in the endeavor, that's when I say yes.
Chappie, you said no. I think you meant more specifically when you're on a board. Tell us what you meant.
Well, the reason why I said no, again, it was maybe the 3rd or 4th time you're asked to join a board. Everybody in this room is a high achiever. Everyone in this room wants to do the best job they can, whether it's serving on a nonprofit board or at their job or whatever. Everybody wants to do the best they can. And if you reach your level of capacity in terms of time or energy, you're not going to do the best job. And what I found is I said yes at least one time too many, where I'm not able to give it my best effort for all the boards because I'm just so spread thin.
Yeah.
So just be realistic in terms of your capacity and what you're able to do.
Okay. So, did you want to say something? Okay. So, looking back on the pivots in your career and the times you've been someplace a long time, what do you wish you had known? If only I had known this earlier, it would have made my life easier, more productive, more joyful, whatever. But as you look back, if only I had known or done.
Go ahead.
Is it okay if I say I don't have regrets?
Sure.
I really...
Lucky you.
No regrets, no fears.
No, it's not as if I haven't thought, like, what if. But I do feel that I don't have regrets over my career path. I've been very intentional about many things. And I feel it's been accretive. And it's suited my evolving self at different points in my life. I suspect that's not the answer you were expecting. But I thought a lot about your question. I looked at it maybe 10 times.
Wow.
That's
Great
fine.
Student. Thank you.
No,
I want the...
I looked at it 10 times, too. No, I don't want to brag. I don't have any regrets about my career either. I feel very, very grateful for my career. People told me all along it's all about relationships and foster those relationships, but everybody always told me that in the context of business, and I kind of bristle with that. This is bad, but I have rarely done things because it's going to further me in business, and that's the sole and only reason. It just doesn't get me going. I wish somebody told me how relationships are so important to your entire life and happiness, because if I really understood that, and by the way, if I knew how fast time went, because as time goes by, there's certain things that you say, oh, I'll do that when I get to it, and things go fast, man. And so if I had known how important relationships were, I did pretty well on that front, but I would have been more methodical. I think people today with social media, there's a structure, so I think it's easier in a lot of ways. But I definitely would have been better there. The other thing that I would do is the people that I think we probably know, we all know a handful of people like this, but the people who respond to someone who needs help professionally and actually follows through and like connects that person to 3 or 4 other people and then follows up with those 3 or 4 other people and all that kind of stuff. I wish I were that person. It's really, and again, this is not for business purposes. I think it comes back for business purposes, but from a life perspective, I've had the chance to do it a couple of times, but if you help somebody find a job or you help them solve a real problem, man, you're rocking the world and you're rocking their world, and it's really, really exciting. And at my firm, Cooley, there's 2 men who just are really good at this, and one of them I don't even like that much, but everybody adores because he's so good. And it's not, we reach out to people all the time, and we know those people. I always one of those people, you go, okay, and maybe I might send one email on them, but to really engage to help people. And again, my thought was always, I'll do that for the next person who comes along. Right. So those are the 2 changes I would make.
Those are great. Love them.
Well, I have enough regrets to make up for everybody in this room. You know, I was just mentioning that I regret not wearing the colorful socks that I wanted to wear. Yeah, I just wore some basic black socks. I wanted to wear something more colorful. But the topic at hand, I really have a regret of waiting so long to run for public office. I told you about how I was torturing my wife for 19 years. And anybody else that would listen, what I wanted to do. So I was older when I actually ran for public office. I was in my almost mid-50s. And so that really shortened my runway in terms of, any future, elected office, because I just waited so long in my life. So that is a major regret, that I didn't follow my passion, do what I wanted to do and need to do earlier.
Yeah, we all need your wife in our household to move us along. And all right, this is a hard one, so answer it or not. If you had to describe your career path as a book, movie, or song, what would you call it?
I thought it was what would it be?
Oh, what would it be?
Oh, I got to rethink this whole thing.
Fine, no, answer that question, but I think Beth's going to go first.
Okay. For me, again, I've looked at this a few times. Thought a lot about it. For me, definitely a book. But let's unpack this because, I asked the question of my family, how would you describe your life and your career path? And they're like, that's interesting, including Benjamin, who's, works with Nora as well. Let's unpack this. A song can be lovely and it's melodic and it's generally simpler. A movie is fast, it's flowing, it's shorter, it's compact, it's compelling, it's memorable. It's generally designed to sell to a larger audience. A book can be complicated and it's deliberate and it can be slower, it's longer, it has chapters, there's sequencing, there's foreshadowing, there's a beginning, there's an end, characters fade in and out. There's a protagonist, there's an antagonist, or more than one, and a book is generally better suited to a smaller audience. Here I am in front of 100 people. But
book all the way,
definitely
right?
a book.
Got it.
Great question.
Great answer.
I was thinking about that question as well. Who saw the movie Rudy? Anybody see the movie Rudy? For whatever reason, Rudy came to mind, and then once that came to mind, I had to unpack it and figure out why. It popped in my head, and I think a big reason is, he was an underdog. He was going against the odds, and I kind of just really connected and related to that, as well as he had perseverance. He failed, he fell down, he got back up, kept going, and I saw a lot of parallels with my life journey. I've had my failures and, setbacks, but I was able to just pick myself up, dust myself off, and just keep moving forward. So that, if I wanted to describe a movie that really kind of connected to my life experience, I would definitely say Rudy would be that movie.
That's great. Thanks. And you can ask the different question and answer it.
So I was going to say Bob Dylan's Times They Are A-Changin', but I asked a friend, with respect, I hate these questions. They're so hard.
That's why I ask and I don't answer, right?
And so I asked a friend for that, and they said Dead Poets Society. And I thought about that, and when I'm having my hero visions, I'm Mr. Keating in Dead Poets Society, for people that remember that, right?
Yeah.
And the person who comes back to their high school after a lifetime of experiences to challenge and motivate and inspire young minds to think outside the box. That's when I hero worship. But a much more video would be, has anybody seen the Saturday Night Live skit of Dead Poets Society? It is awesome. So it's a scene, if you remember Dead Poets Society, at the very end, Mr. Keating has been fired. The headmaster of the school is in front of the class, and he's forcing the kids to take out their poetry book. And that's the book where all the kids rip the pages out. Remember the very beginning, because they were going to think outside the box. And so in Saturday Night Live, it's an old room. It looks like from the 1940s, and it's got a ceiling fan going around. And Fred Armisen, I think, comes in, and he's Mr. Keating. And as he's walking out, if you remember in the original movie, in this big scene, as he walks out, one student steps up and stands on their desk and says, "Oh, Captain, my Captain," which is both a tribute to him and an opening line from I think it's a Walt Whitman poem. And then the next person stands up and says, "Oh, Captain, my Captain," and it's really quite emotional. SNL skit is awesome. So the first kid gets up and says, "Oh, Captain, my Captain." The second one, they go 3 or 4. Finally, Pete Davidson, who's playing Dalton, who's the main young boy in it, stands up, and as he starts standing, he gets decapitated by the fan. Blood goes all over the place. It is great. You got to Google it. Anyway, that's the way I feel about half the times after my classes are finished.
I love it. I love it.
So are you a movie or an SNL skit?
Oh, I'm an SNL skit movie. I'm all SNL, yes. Yeah.
So I'm going to switch this up a little bit rather than break into groups. So how many people here are really thinking about a job shift or taking on something additional? A lot of people. All right. So you're talking to 3 people who have done it. Any suggestions for how people might start exploring something new? And a companion question, what are the skills or attitudes or behaviors that you needed to learn to make that shift?
Let me say something just real quick.
Please.
I'm totally convinced. I've just been educated on this in the last 6 weeks when I first got a call to be on this panel. If you're looking to get on a nonprofit board, I think you're crazy not to call Nora. But with all respect at this point, I mean, it's what they have here. And I've done some research since we had our initial discussion.
Oh, thank you.
It's really good, and there's no downside to it. And just to find out what's out there and how you can pull a package together. That's where I would start if I were. The other thing I would say is I wouldn't wait till your career is at the point where you feel like you have extra time. I think that's in some ways maybe too late. It's not too late, but I would look for earlier opportunities, because the truth of the matter is I feel if you're involved in a nonprofit that brings you passion and joy, it takes up no time in a way. And it actually makes everything else that you're doing, you're more efficient with. So I wouldn't delay that unnecessarily. But the first stop was a call to you.
Thank you.
You want to share your phone number?
I will, but you won't remember it. But you might remember norasilver@berkeley.edu. And you'll get the QR code at the end.
I think networking is incredibly important. Just think about what it is that you want to pursue and who you know who's already working in that area, already in that field. They know you, or they may not know you, but they may know somebody else. And just think long and hard about where you might make your connections. Many people in this room here. Also think about the entities and the passions that are so important to you, and think through, how can I be part of that? How can I participate? What's that going to look like?
Okay, thanks. Chappie, I want to narrow it for you. Nobody's serving on public service boards here yet. Why do it? Make your pitch.
Wow. Again, how much time do you have? Serving on the San Jose City Council, I also served on the Valley Transportation Authority Board as chairman. I served as president of the Santa Clara County Cities Association, which represented all 15 cities in Santa Clara County. And actually, I did all of that at the same time. So I was pretty busy. What I'll say is, particularly just focusing in on San Jose, to have the opportunity to impact a city of 1 million people and hopefully make their lives better, that is an opportunity of a lifetime. I feel so honored and privileged to have that opportunity and to know I made a difference. And I've had residents, even after I was off council, come up to me and thank me for my service and thank me for what I did. And there's just the joy and satisfaction of being able to accomplish something like that. It's just hard to describe. If you have an opportunity, whether it's serving on a school board, city council, city commission, county commission, whatever that is, strongly consider it, because, again, very, very few people have that opportunity to make a difference in other people's lives.
Can I
Sure, please.
So I've only read one do-it-yourself book in my entire life, so it's not what I do. I would recommend, if you're talking about a career change, a real career change, a book called From Strength to Strength by, I think it's Arthur Brooks, it might be David Brooks.
It's Arthur Brooks.
It is phenomenal. I mean, it really talked to me, and we got applause back there. I mean, it's a really good book. It's the only book I've sent to friends. I've sent it to a bunch of different people, and to me, it was a really helpful way of thinking through issues, and it actually gave me some confidence in going and teaching. They talk about different intelligence, what ways people think at different times. And as you get older, you are, it claims, better sort of teaching and conveying knowledge and wisdom and that kind of thing. But anyway, I would recommend that book if you're seriously looking at a transition.
And I would second that even if you're not looking for a transition, because it talks about how you go through life and how things change, whether you do or not, right, your job. Okay, so we've got about 15 minutes. I'd love to see if there are any questions from the audience. Anything you're curious about? Oh, hands in the back. Okay, Lizzie, can you help us? Thanks.
So this is for Chappie. So you went from a well-paid tech kind of a job to a complete uncertainty, like, especially going to public life, running for an office. So what are some of the things that you did, like, to make that switch financially, emotionally? There's so many things that comes up, So I just want to hear, how you went about it.
Well, you definitely changed your lifestyle, for sure, for sure. We just, budgeting, changed our lifestyle. I actually had to sell a lot of my stock, particularly my Apple stock, because to avoid a conflict of interest on some of the city votes that we had, because Apple owns property in San Jose. So wow. I had to take a financial hit selling a lot of my stock. So, I mean, it's just something that that you're going to have to do it's going to be a financial sacrifice. But again, the financial piece, was a little difficult, but the psychological, emotional piece of knowing that you're making a difference and improving people's lives and having an impact more than made up for it.
Thanks.
Hi, I'm Ashley Kleckner, and this is my 10-year reunion.
Yay.
And I have a question about for you, Chappie, about my best friend, who's also a 10-year reunion. Her name's Jessie Szymanski. She's sitting next to me.
She's anonymous.
This is her. And my best friend for the past 8-ish years has been feeling a passion pull for community service, specifically running for office. And I have found that I have been unable to convince her to take that step.
So you outed her instead.
So I need advice, but let's just pretend she's not here. She's not important to this. I need your advice for how am I going to convince her to take those first steps? What are those first steps? And I need to support her better in this because I clearly haven't done a good job thus far. So that's what I need your pitch for. I need your help.
Well, what I would recommend as a first step is to create an exploratory committee, obviously headed up by you. But I mean, literally getting the word out, letting people know that she's interested and she wants to pursue this, and just having those conversations. Reach out to other elected officials, reach out to community leaders, reach out to advocates and organizations, and just have those conversations. And I think as she gets more, or I'll talk directly to you. as you get more, positive feedback and just, reinforcement in terms of you're doing the right thing and you're a good person to run for that particular office, I think it kind of builds on itself. And at some point, there's literally a tipping point where you get so much positive feedback and so much affirmation that you're going to go, okay, I can do this. And I think that at that tipping point is when you're going to make the decision. Thank you. So good luck.
Can I just add?
Please.
I just want to add one quick thing. So for my entire career, people always ask me, what would you do if you hadn't been a lawyer? My answer was always the same three things. It was, I would have gone into journalism, which I'm glad I missed that because I was dying. Been a high school history teacher, which I'm doing,
Wow.
or run for elective office. Those were always my big three. And I regret not having done it. That's the one thing in my career. And I do think that's a job. I think you should tell everybody. I think it's harder as you get older in a way to make that jump because there's so much risk, there's so much vulnerability. There's and so that's one of those things that is, at least for me, as I got older, that seemed less and less realistic to me.
Yeah, I would just add, because I'm talking to a bunch of MBAs, you have the skills that are so needed in public office. This time last year, we had a different panel, and there was someone who was a mayor, actually, of another city. And she was talking skill after skill after skill, that she brought the financial mindset that really wasn't very strong otherwise, that marketing and knowing how to deal with different constituents, dealing with organizational change, all of those things that MBAs are trained to do. You're wonderful, wonderful generalists. So when you're on a city council or a school board, you're able to look at the different facets that go into it. So you are prepared. That's what I would say. Now that we pushed you out into the world, enjoy the rest of your day.
Good luck.
So, do you want to declare it?
My name is Kyle Ora. It's also my 10-year reunion.
All right.
Yeah, I know like a lot of us don't give ourselves credit for being on boards because, if you have families, you are a board chairman or chairwoman of your family or whatever unit. And I was just wondering, knowing that you could have a second act or third act or whatnot, and doing it, has that changed how you would be a parent or or mentor for the next generation?
Go ahead, Jeff.
There's only upside, right? So I actually don't have kids, so I'm the last one who should talk on the subject. But I'm a lawyer, so it's never stopped me. But I can see other people, and I can actually see I'm very close to my nieces and nephews. They get it. They go, that's cool. So from one of the big roles of a parent is obviously being a role model. I think from a role model perspective, it's sending all the right signals that you're confident to take risks, that life is an adventure, that you're going to do different things. I think it's great from a role model perspective. I mean, what I've seen from friends who've done similar things, the kids, after a while you hear the kids in high school talking about how cool their mom is or how cool their dad is because of these kind of things.
What you just said.
Who needs to be a parent?
Well, and my eldest actually does work for a not-for-profit. And she watched me as an early age, always toting her along to various events and various programs, things I was doing. I have been asked many times, many times by many people, wow, Beth, you're not being paid to do that work, and you're spending 15, 20 hours a week. And it never even occurred to me to be compensated for something that I love to do. And your kids, you are their role model. You are their, do you have children? Two, okay. And what are their ages?
Daughter 10 and son 7.
Okay, perfect age for them to watch what you do. And I've done everything from teaching finance at the high school level. I taught a lot of financial literacy. I still do for at-risk youth on the peninsula at various high schools and in San Jose. Environmental education. I've done so many different things. And my kids have watched me through this through all the years. I won't say that they're all involved in philanthropy now. They'd like to be, but they're definitely gunning it with their careers. But you are the role model, and life is long.
And I just wanted to add that a little story occurred to me when you asked. I have two kids too. My older one's a son, and he, when he was about, in college age, he reported that I was always there when he came home from school. I was a single mother. I was out working full time in San Francisco, but I was there enough that in his mind, kids see things differently, right? They experience whether the nature of things, not the exact things that you do. And he did become a journalist at one point and wrote about, I was a domestic violence executive director, he wrote about the importance of community resources for women who were in danger. And I never knew he picked that up. But your kids pick up by osmosis what you do, what you care about, and they may not do exactly the same things, but they do learn to care because you do.
More questions?
Hi, my name is Jan Chow. I'm a physician. 20th reunion, all three of us right here. I think we're all dropping like flies. There's something about getting older.
Well, we're glad you're here.
Yeah, in case something happens here. So I have switched careers 3 or 4 times actually.
Great.
And one of the things, I don't know if it affects the panel, I'd like to ask them is, you get a sense that the opportunity cost is rising. That is, you have less and less time as you get older. And I was wondering if that sometimes can drive you to do things that you wouldn't have done otherwise. And the other thing that resonated was something that Beth said, which is that I always ask when I'm asked to do something is, how can I contribute? Because if I can't contribute, no matter how much I want to do it, it's a waste of time, a waste of your time, right? So just curious to see how you respond to that.
I definitely feel the clock ticking. So I can relate to when you talk about the opportunity cost. And that was really kind of my inflection point when I decided to make that major change is, I'm in my 50s, the clock is ticking, my horizon is not as long, I'm just going to go for it. And I think we all have to make that decision regardless of, what point in our lives we are. But there's going to come a time for all of us where you're just going to realize that if I delay this any further, that the window's going to close and I'm not going to be able to pursue that dream.
Exactly what Chappie said. I mean, that's meaningful to me. I'm 62, so I'm going to go teach kids. My window's 5 years, right? So it was very much a precipitating factor that if I didn't do it now, I just wouldn't be able to do it.
I think my kids actually picked up, and I've actually told them that there'll be times in your life, especially in the near future, where society is changing and technology is changing. So if you choose a tech career, for instance, you have to learn to change careers, actually, or change entire fields all the time. So teaching resilience is what I'm hoping to pass to my kids, and they see in what I'm doing. But I think it's a tough one because as you get older, there's an imposter syndrome. Because every time you get into something new, you're not qualified. I tell my new folks, every time I see them, I'm not qualified. I don't know why you asked me to do this, but I take the risk, and it's always paid out. It's always paid out.
It is. I've had the fortune of having both of these feelings at different times. It's a lot more fun to be the young hotshot in the room, than the old wizened guy. It just, there's no question. But you got to adopt that. You got to own that as you get older, and it is a different.
That's when they call you seasoned. Seasoned,
exactly.
Right.
Exactly. I'm
Right.
fully seasoned.
Right. One more, and then
Hi, my name is Shelley Geyer, class of '88 MBA. I serve on the Commission on Volunteers for the state of California. And one of the things that is really important right now is that with all of these cuts, the nonprofits do not have funding and they do not have staff, and they're trying to kill AmeriCorps and things like that.
Right.
So I just think if anybody wants to get involved in volunteerism, how would you, Nora, suggest that they find the match? So what are your skills, and then who could use those skills?
Okay. This is what I did before I came to Haas. I ran something called the Volunteerism Project to strengthen the ways that people could get involved. And I think it's not, there are websites to do this. I'm not recommending them. What I would say is a couple things. One is pay attention to who's doing something that you really admire. Tap into first, people said it up here, what's your passion? You're seeing somebody do something in a particular area or using a particular skill, and you say, oh man, I would really like to do that. That's meaningful. Pay attention to those things. The other thing I would say is look at what is around you. I don't know where you all live. Many of us live in the Bay Area. There are so many nonprofits, right? Nationwide, there are almost 1.9 million nonprofits. There are city councils, there are school boards. Wherever you are, there is a way to plug in. If you're interested in the alumni board community, I'm going to see if this, use this QR code, get to us, and we will help you think through, if you want to serve on a board, how to prepare, how to approach, and what kind of board you might be interested in. If you're interested in volunteering, I will say this. I will put myself out there. This is near and dear to my heart. I believe that it's people who solve problems, and it's groups of people who solve problems called organizations. And we need all the talent we can get. Whatever you care about. For me, it's education. For you, it might be health. Whatever it is, I am willing to talk to you one-on-one, Nora Silver at berkeley.edu, to help you think through those steps. Because it's not just clicking on a website. It's doing some questioning yourself. It's looking at what's around you. And I'd be honored to help any of you find your next step. So would you join me in thanking our panelists?